Captain Mok Taiwan stared at the official orders on his screen and frowned. After 15 years commanding ships in the Galactic Confederation fleet, he had never received an order like this. A human crew member? He said out loud to his empty office. The words felt strange in his mouth. Humans were new to the Confederation. Their planet, Earth, had only joined 8 years ago. Most captains had never even met a human, let alone worked with one. Stories about them spread quickly through the fleet, strange tales of beings who could break bones and keep fighting, who purposely ate spicy foods that caused pain, and who sometimes stayed awake for days with no ill effects. Taiwan tapped his communication panel. Senior Officer Meeting, Command Center, 1 hour. A human? On our ship? Dr. Suk Yunji's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress among her people. Captain, I must object. Their biology is disturbing. Did you know they have a skeleton made of calcium inside their bodies? And they continue functioning even when this internal frame breaks. The command staff of the Dauntless sat around the oval table, all looking uncomfortable. The order comes from Fleet Command, Taiwan said simply. The human will serve as our first officer. Navigator Dae Han Sol gasped. First officer? But that position requires access to all ship systems. Security Chief Lee Seung-ha leaned forward. I've studied reports on humans. They are unpredictable. They make decisions based on something they call gut feelings rather than logic. Communications Specialist Ha Min-ji, the youngest officer on the ship, had been quiet until now. Is it true they can drink poison for fun? She asked. They call it alcohol, Dr. Suk said, and yes, they consume it knowing it damages their cells, for pleasure. She shuddered, all 6 arms wrapping around herself. Captain Taiwan raised a hand for silence. The human officer will arrive tomorrow. His name is Park Ji-ho. He has served on 3 ships already and comes with high recommendations. He did not mention the notes in Ji-ho's file about excessive risk-taking and unconventional problem-solving. Our mission remains the same, Taiwan continued. We patrol the Caraxian border for 3 months. Simple. Routine. We will all act professionally. As his officers filed out, Taiwan wondered if he sounded more confident than he felt. The shuttle docked smoothly with the Dauntless. Captain Taiwan stood at attention in the docking bay. His senior staff lined up beside him. They had all taken mild calming medications prescribed by Dr. Suk. The airlock hissed open. First Officer Park Ji-ho stepped onto the deck of the Dauntless. He looked surprisingly normal. About the same height as Taiwan, with black hair and brown eyes. His skin was a shade of tan. He wore the standard blue uniform of the Confederation fleet. The only odd thing was the way he moved, with a strange bounce, as if gravity wasn't holding him down properly. Permission to come aboard, Captain? Ji-ho asked, saluting in the Confederation manner. Granted, First Officer Park, Taiwan said stiffly. Welcome to the Dauntless. Ji-ho smiled, showing flat white teeth. Several crew members stepped back slightly. Thank you, sir. I look forward to serving with you all. Ji-ho turned to the other officers. I've read your service records. Impressive work during the Naborian conflict, Dr. Suk. And Navigator Day, your plotting through the Whirlpool Nebula saved many lives. The officers looked surprised that the human had done research on them. Security Chief Lee will show you to your quarters, Taiwan said. Then report to the command center for orientation. Yes, sir, Ji-ho replied. As he followed Chief Lee from the docking bay, the officers exchanged glances. The human seemed normal. Perhaps this wouldn't be so bad after all. 3 hours later, alarms blared through the ship. Hull breach Section 14, shouted the computer. Emergency protocols activated. Captain Taiwan and First Officer Ji-ho were in the middle of reviewing patrol routes when the alarm sounded. Section 14, that's near engineering, Taiwan said. Already running toward the emergency. Ji-ho followed close behind. They arrived to find chaos. A maintenance panel had blown out during a routine check, causing a small but dangerous hull breach. The automatic systems had sealed the main corridor, but engineer Kim Do-young was trapped in a small maintenance tube with the breach. The emergency seal in the tube failed, Security Chief Lee reported. We're losing air in that section. Engineer, Kim has about 8 minutes of oxygen left. Repair team status, Taewon demanded. En route, sir. ETA 12 minutes. Too long, Taewon said grimly. Options? Dr. Suk shook her head. We cannot reach him without exposing ourselves to vacuum. I can do it, Ji-ho said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at the human. That's impossible, Doctor, Suk said. The breach is letting in space radiation. Even with a suit, I don't need a full suit, Ji-ho said. Just give me a breathing mask and some sealing foam. Before anyone could stop him, Ji-ho grabbed an emergency kit from the wall and a breathing mask. He keyed the override code on the sealed door. Wait, Dr. Suk cried. You'll die. Ji-ho flashed that strange white-toothed smile again. Humans can handle vacuum exposure for about 90 seconds before permanent damage. I only need 60. The door slid open, and Ji-ho slipped inside. The second door would open into the depressurized area. The crew watched through the small window, horrified and fascinated. Ji-ho put on the breathing mask, took a deep breath, and opened the inner door. The rush of escaping air pulled at his uniform, but he braced himself against the wall. Moving with surprising speed, he pulled himself along safety handles toward where Engineer Kim huddled, looking terrified. The breach was obvious. A jagged hole about the size of a fist, with space visible beyond. Ji-ho reached into his kit, pulled out the canister of emergency sealing foam, and sprayed it directly over the breach. His hand remained pressed against the foam as it expanded and hardened, even though the skin of his hand was exposed to vacuum and radiation. With the breach sealed, Ji-ho helped the engineer to his feet. Together, they made it back to the airlock and cycled through. When the inner door opened, Ji-ho and Engineer Kim stumbled out. The crew stared in shock. Ji-ho's exposed hand was red and blistered. Ice crystals had formed on his eyebrows and hair from the moisture freezing in vacuum, but he was standing, breathing, and apparently fine. Engineer Kim needs medical attention, Ji-ho said calmly. He inhaled some vacuum before I got to him. Dr. Suk rushed forward with her medical scanner, dividing her attention between the engineer and the seemingly indestructible human. Your hand, she said to Ji-ho. The radiation burns. Ji-ho looked down at his blistered skin. Oh, that's nothing serious, just like a bad sunburn. I'll put some cream on it. The gathered crew members exchanged looks of horror and amazement. Later, in the medical bay, Captain Taewon found Ji-ho having his hand treated. That was impressive first, officer, Taewon said carefully. Ji-ho shrugged. Anyone would have done the same. No, Taewon said firmly. They would not. No other species in the Confederation could have survived what you just did. Well, humans are pretty tough, Ji-ho said. It's because our planet tried to kill us. A lot during our evolution. Taewon wasn't sure if that was a joke. The crew is talking about what happened. I think they're less afraid of you now. They were afraid before? Ji-ho looked genuinely surprised. Of course. Humans are... Taewon searched for a diplomatic word. Terrifying, Ji-ho suggested with a smile. Different, Taewon finished diplomatically. As Taewon left the medical bay, he heard crew members whispering. Word of the human's actions had spread quickly throughout the ship. Perhaps he thought this assignment wouldn't be as simple as he had hoped, but it might be more interesting than he had feared. 3 weeks passed since First Officer Park Ji-ho joined the crew of the Dauntless. The ship continued its patrol along the Caraxian border without problems. The crew was still wary of the human, but the story of how he saved Engineer Kim had earned him some respect. Communications specialist Ha Min-ji found herself watching Ji-ho during her shifts. Unlike the other officers who avoided the human, she was curious. Humans were rare in this part of space, and she had many questions. Do you really need to sleep every day? She asked Ji-ho one day in the ship's dining area. Ji-ho looked up from his food tray. Yes, but not for very long when needed. I can go about 3 days without sleep before things get really bad. 3 days? Minji's antenna twitched in surprise. Her species needed 12 hours of hibernation cycle every day. That seems unnatural. Jiho smiled. On Earth, some animals never really sleep at all. Dolphins rest half their brain at a time. Minji wasn't sure what a dolphin was, but the idea of partial sleep sounded horrifying. Their conversation was cut short when Captain Taewan's voice came over the ship's speakers. All senior officers to the command center. Emergency situation. We've received a distress call from Proxima Research Station, Captain Taewan explained when the officers gathered. The message was cut off, but they reported an attack. Caraxian. Raiders. The officers exchanged worried looks. Caraxians were known for their raids on border stations. Aren't there 30 scientists on that station? Dr. Suk asked. 32, Navigator Day Hansol confirmed. Mostly Luridians like Dr. Suk, with a few Zentari. We're the closest Confederation ship, Taewan said. ETA to Proxima Station is 14 hours. We'll form a rescue team once we arrive. First Officer Park will lead it. Jiho nodded, his face serious. I'll prepare the team, sir. As the meeting ended, Security Chief Lee approached Jiho. I should tell you, First Officer, Caraxians are dangerous. They have natural armor and are excellent fighters. Jiho's expression didn't change. I've read the reports. We'll be ready. 14 hours later, the Dauntless approached Proxima Station. From the outside, the station looked undamaged. Scans show life signs, reported Science Officer Yoon Sun-hai. Multiple species, but there's interference with our sensors. It could be a trap, Chief Lee warned. Captain Taewan turned to Jiho. First Officer, what's your assessment, Jiho? Studied the station scans. The scientists are likely hostages. The Caraxians will expect a rescue team. He paused. We need to enter through an unexpected route. The station's defenses are still active, Navigator Day pointed out. Any approach will be detected. Not if we use a maintenance airlock, Jiho replied. They're too small for normal docking, but a shuttle could get close enough for a spacewalk. Captain Taewan frowned. That area has high radiation from the station's engines. I can handle it, Jiho said. I'll need 2 officers with me. Minji spoke up before she could stop herself. I volunteer, sir. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Communication specialists rarely joined rescue missions. I speak basic Caraxian, she explained. And I'm small enough to fit through maintenance tunnels. Jiho nodded. Good thinking. Chief Lee, you're with us too. The shuttle approached Proxima Station from below, using the engine section for cover. Jiho, Minji, and Chief Lee wore space suits as they prepared to exit. Remember, Jiho told them, quick bursts of movement, then hide. The radiation will interfere with their sensors, but they might spot us visually. Chief Lee checked his weapon. How will we get through the airlock? It'll be locked. Jiho pulled out a small device. Universal bypass. Works on most Confederation locks. Seeing their surprised looks, he added, it's standard equipment for human officers. We're good at getting into places. The spacewalk was terrifying. Minji had trained for zero gravity, but doing it near active engines with radiation, warnings flashing on her suit display, was different. She followed Jiho as he moved with surprising grace between pieces of station equipment. When they reached the maintenance airlock, Jiho attached his bypass device. The airlock opened silently, and they slipped inside. Once they were safely in the station, they removed their helmets. Jiho checked a small scanner. The scientists are being held in the main lab, he whispered. 8 Caraxian signatures nearby. We're only 3, Chief Lee pointed out. Standard procedure would be to wait for backup. Jiho shook his head. No time. They might be hurting the scientists. He turned to Minji. Can you access the station's systems from a terminal? Minji nodded. If I can reach a communication node, yes. Good, here's the plan. Minji worked frantically at the terminal. She had slipped through the ventilation system, something her small size made possible, to reach this communications room. Now she was trying to access the station's internal systems. Got it, she whispered into her communicator. Perfect, Jiho's voice came back. Shut down the lights in sections B through F in exactly 2 minutes. Minji programmed the command, her hands shaking slightly. What about you? I'm in position. Chief Lee is covering the exit route. Just be ready to run when I give the signal. The plan seemed crazy to Minji. Jiho was going to create a distraction while she and Chief Lee freed the scientists. But he would be alone against 8 Caraxians. 2 minutes later, the lights went out in 5 sections of the station. Minji heard distant shouts, and then a series of loud bangs. Now! Jiho's voice crackled over the communicator. Minji ran toward the main lab using her scanner to navigate in the darkness. She found Chief Lee outside the lab door. The human is insane, Lee said, but he sounded impressed. He set off some kind of chemical explosion in the galley. The noise drew half the Caraxians away. Together they opened the lab door. Inside, 32 terrified scientists looked up at them. Confederation rescue, Chief Lee announced. Follow us quickly and quietly. As they led the scientists out, Minji's communicator crackled again. Change of plans, Jiho said, his voice strained. Main route is blocked. Go to emergency exit E7. But that's on the other side of the station, Minji protested. Trust me, I'll meet you there. Chief Lee guided the scientists through dark corridors. Twice they had to hide as Caraxian raiders ran past, responding to alarms that were now blaring throughout the station. When they reached exit E7, it was sealed shut. It's locked down, Chief Lee said, trying the controls. We need an override. Where? Is First Officer Park? One of the scientists asked fearfully. As if in answer, the door to an adjacent corridor burst open. Jiho stumbled through, his uniform torn and singed in places. Blood, red human blood, ran from a cut on his forehead. Sorry I'm late, he said, breathing hard. Had to take a detour. You're injured, Minji said, concerned. Jiho waved it away. Just a scratch. The exit? Locked down, Chief Lee reported. Jiho examined the door. I can open it, but the area between here and the shuttle has no atmosphere. We lost that section when the Caraxians attacked. Then we're trapped, one scientist said. No, Jiho replied. We go through anyway. The distance is about 50 meters, with no air, but in artificial gravity. Chief Lee stared at him. That's impossible. No one can survive vacuum exposure that long. You can, Jiho said, looking at the scientists. For about 30 seconds. That's enough time if we move fast. I'll go first and last to help anyone who struggles. Minji couldn't believe what she was hearing. You want us to run through vacuum? It won't be comfortable, Jiho admitted, but it won't kill you. Not in such a short exposure. The scientists looked terrified, but they had no choice. Caraxian voices could be heard growing closer. Jiho prepped the airlock. Take the deepest breath you can. Move fast. Don't try to hold your breath in vacuum, that will damage your lungs. Let it out slowly. 30 seconds, that's all. As the first group prepared to go through, Minji saw something in Jiho's eyes. Not fear, but a fierce determination. In that moment, she understood why humans were both terrifying and amazing. One by one, the scientists made the vacuum dash. Jiho went back and forth, helping those who panicked or slowed. By the time everyone was safely aboard the shuttle, he had crossed the vacuum-exposed section 8 times. As the shuttle pulled away from the station, Minji watched Jiho checking on the scientists. Despite his own injuries, he was making sure everyone else was okay. Your species is strange, she told him quietly. Jiho smiled tiredly. We're just adaptable. When things get tough, humans keep going. Minji decided that was both the most comforting and the most frightening thing she had ever heard. The successful rescue mission at Proxima Station changed how the crew of the Dauntless felt about First Officer Park Jiho. They still found him strange, but they no longer avoided him in the corridors. Some, like communications specialist Minji, even sought out his company. Captain Mok Taewon noticed this change. He saw how Navigator Dae Hansol now asked Jiho's opinion on route planning, how Security Chief Lee Sung-ha had started practicing human fighting techniques. Even Dr. Suk Yoonji, who had been the most afraid of the human, now studied Jiho's medical scans with interest rather than horror. 1 month into their patrol mission, the Dauntless approached the Serpent's Nebula, a vast cloud of gas and dust that marked the border of Confederation space. It was a dangerous area to navigate, with strong radiation and magnetic fields that interfered with sensors. "Sensors show all clear," reported Science Officer Yoon Sun-hai from her station. "No ships detected within range." "Proceed with caution," Captain Taewon ordered. "The nebula can hide many things." Jiho stood beside the captain's chair, studying the main view screen. The nebula looked like a giant snake made of glowing green and purple clouds. "Sir," Jiho said quietly, "something doesn't feel right." Taewon looked at his first officer. Most species in the Confederation relied on technology and logic, but he had learned that humans sometimes sense things that sensors couldn't detect. "Explain," he said. Jiho frowned. "This route is too obvious. If I were planning an ambush, this is where I would do it." Before Taewon could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. "Multiple ships decloaking," shouted Sun-hai. "3 Caraxian cruisers." The view screen showed 3 large warships appearing from behind gas clouds, their weapons already aimed at the Dauntless. "Battle stations," ordered Taewon. "Shields up." The crew rushed to their emergency positions. Weapons Officer Kang Jun-seo activated the ship's defense systems, but his face was grim. "Captain, they've surrounded us," he reported. 1 cruiser ahead, 1 behind, 1 below. Each ship is twice our size with triple our firepower." A message appeared on the communication screen. A Caraxian commander, his scaled face filling the screen. "Confederation vessel," the commander growled. "You are in disputed territory. Surrender your ship or be destroyed." Captain Taewon knew the Serpent's Nebula was not disputed territory. It had been part of Confederation space for over 50 years. This was a deliberate provocation. "We are on a sanctioned patrol in Confederation space," Taewon replied calmly. "We have no hostile intentions." The Caraxian laughed. "3 of our ships against your 1. Surrender now." The screen went dark. "Options?" Taewon asked his officers. "Standard protocol suggests surrender when outnumbered 3 to 1, Security Chief Lee said. "We can request diplomatic resolution." "If we surrender, they'll take the ship," Weapons Officer Kang argued. "The Caraxians want our technology." "We cannot outfight them," Navigator Day added, "and we cannot outrun them in the nebula." All eyes turned to Jiho, who had been silent during the exchange. The human had a strange look on his face, not fear, but a kind of intense focus. "First Officer?" Taewon prompted. "We can escape," Jiho said, "but it requires something unconventional." "Explain," Taewon ordered. Jiho moved to the navigation console. "The nebula has pockets of highly reactive gas. If we vent our warp core coolant near one of these pockets, it will create a massive energy discharge. That would damage our ship." Navigator Day protested. "Not if we're prepared for it," Jiho continued. "The discharge will blind their sensors for approximately 12 seconds. During that time, we can perform a series of micro-jumps." Micro-jumps? Taewon had never heard of such a maneuver. "Short warp jumps, less than 1 light second each," Jiho explained. 5 jumps in rapid succession, each in a different direction. The nebula will hide our warp signature, and they won't be able to track us." The bridge fell silent. What Jiho suggested went against all Confederation naval training. The stress on the ship would be enormous, Engineer Kim Do-young said from the engineering station. "And on the crew as well." "It's either that or surrender," Jiho said simply. Captain Taewon studied his first officer's face. The human seemed completely certain of his plan. How do humans come up with such ideas? Taewon wondered aloud. Jiho smiled slightly. "We evolved as prey animals that became predators. We're good at escaping and good at chasing." Taewon made his decision. "We will try First Officer Park's plan. All crew secure for extreme maneuvers." As the crew prepared, Weapons Officer Kang approached Jiho. "This plan is madness," Kang said quietly. Sometimes madness is exactly what you need, Jiho replied. Caraxian vessels are charging weapons, reported Science Officer Yoon. Coolant venting system ready, Engineer Kim confirmed. Micro-jump coordinates programmed, Navigator Day said, though his voice trembled slightly. Captain Tae-wan looked at Jiho. Now, First Officer. Jiho nodded to Engineer Kim, who pressed a series of controls. Outside the ship, a cloud of glowing blue coolant sprayed into the nebula. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the viewscreen flared blindingly white as the coolant reacted with the nebula gases. The ship shuddered. Their sensors are blind, shouted Science Officer Yoon. Energy discharge is 10 times stronger than predicted. Execute micro-jumps, Tae-wan ordered. Navigator Day activated the first jump. The Dauntless shuddered violently as it entered warp for just a fraction of a second before dropping out, then immediately jumped again, and again. On the fifth jump, there was a loud crack from the navigation console. Navigator Day cried out, in pain as he was thrown from his seat. Last jump complete, Jiho reported, taking over the navigation controls. We're clear of the nebula, no signs of pursuit. Dr. Suk rushed to Navigator Day, who lay on the deck clutching his arm. Her medical scanner hummed. His arm is broken, she reported. Several crew members are reporting injuries, nothing life-threatening. Captain, Tae-wan surveyed his bridge. Displays flickered and the smell of burned circuits filled the air. But they were alive and they had escaped. Damage report, he ordered. Minor hull stress, coolant system offline, sensors at 60%, reported Engineer Kim. But all critical systems are functional. Did we damage any of the Caraxian ships? Tae-wan asked. Weapons Officer Kang checked his console. One cruiser was caught in the energy discharge. Their power systems appear to be offline. A cheer went up from the crew. They had not only escaped but had disabled an enemy ship without firing a shot. Later, in the medical bay, Captain Tae-wan found Navigator Day having his broken arm treated. First Officer Jiho sat nearby, talking quietly with the navigator. So, you've broken your arm before? Day was asking. 3 times, Jiho replied. Once falling from a tree as a child, once during combat training, and once rock climbing. And you continued your activities afterward? Day seemed amazed. After healing, yes. Broken bones are common for humans. We just fix them and move on. Day shook his head in wonder. My people consider a broken bone a major life event. Some never fully recover mentally from the trauma. Jiho smiled. Humans break easily but heal quickly, both our bodies and our minds. Captain Tae-wan cleared his throat to announce his presence. How are you feeling, Navigator? Better now, Captain, Day replied. First Officer Park was telling me about human injuries. Did you know they sometimes break bones on purpose during medical procedures? They call it setting the bone. Tae-wan noticed that Dee didn't seem horrified by this information. Instead, he seemed fascinated. Your plan worked, First Officer, Tae-wan said to Jiho. Unconventional but effective. Thank you, sir, Jiho replied. I'm sorry about the injuries. The crew understood the risks, Tae-wan said, and they're proud of what we accomplished today. As Tae-wan left the medical bay, he realized something had changed. The crew now looked at Jiho with something new in their eyes. Not just acceptance, but respect. Perhaps even admiration. The human was still terrifying. His ideas went against all standard protocols. His body could withstand conditions that would kill most species, and his mind worked in ways that seemed completely alien. But today, those very qualities had saved the Dauntless and her crew. For the first time, Captain Mok Tae-wan was truly glad to have a human as his first officer. 2 weeks after the battle in the Serpent's Nebula, the Dauntless received new orders from Confederation Command. The encounter with the Caraxian warships had increased tensions along the border. Now the Confederation was sending a diplomat to meet with Caraxian leaders. The Dauntless would serve as the escort ship. Captain Mok Tae-wan called a meeting with his senior officers to discuss the mission. We will rendezvous with diplomat Cho Hee-jin tomorrow, he explained. Then we proceed to Neutral Station 7 for the peace talks. Security Chief Lee Seung-ha looked concerned. Captain, After our last encounter with the Caraxians, they may see our ship as a provocation. Confederation Command believes our presence will show strength, Taewon replied. We escaped their ambush. That earned their respect. First Officer. Park Ji-ho had been quiet during the meeting, but now he spoke. In human history, showing strength is often the first step to peace, especially with cultures that value power. The officers considered this idea. It seemed strange to many of them. In most Confederation cultures, peace came through calm discussion and compromise, not shows of strength. Do humans really think that way? Communications specialist Ha Min-ji asked. Ji-ho nodded. For thousands of years, it's only recently that we learned other approaches. Captain Taewon studied his first officer. Each day he understood a little more about humans, and each new thing he learned was both fascinating and disturbing. We depart at 0800 hours, Taewon announced. Prepare the ship. Diplomat Cho Hee-jin was a tall, elegant Zentari with silver skin that reflected the lights of the dauntless docking bay. Captain Taewon and his officers greeted her formally. Welcome aboard, Diplomat Cho, Taewon said, bowing in the Zentari manner. Thank you, Captain, she replied, her voice musical. I understand your ship has recent experience with the Caraxians. Yes, Diplomat. They attempted to ambush us in the Serpent's Nebula. Diplomat Cho turned to First Officer Ji-ho, her silver, eyes widening slightly. A human? How interesting. I've read the report of your escape, most creative. Ji-ho bowed respectfully. The entire crew worked together to execute the plan. But it was a human plan, she said. The Caraxians respect that kind of thinking. It's not so different from their own. This comment surprised the officers. No, one had considered that Caraxians and humans might think similarly. First Officer Park will assist you in any way needed during our journey, Captain Taewon said. Excellent, Diplomat Cho replied. I would like to learn more about human diplomatic approaches. They may be useful in these talks. 3 days later, the Dauntless arrived at Neutral Station 7. The station floated in empty space exactly halfway between Confederation and Caraxian territories. It was designed specifically for diplomatic meetings, with quarters and meeting rooms for many different species. Captain Taewon, First Officer Ji-ho, and Security Chief Lee accompanied Diplomat Cho to the main meeting hall. A Caraxian delegation waited inside, led by Commander Drac, a large Caraxian with red-orange scales and sharp teeth. Confederation representatives, Commander Drac said, his voice a low growl. We meet again, Captain. Taewon recognized him as the commander from the ambush. Yes, Commander. Under more peaceful circumstances this time. The formal greetings finished, everyone sat at a large round table. Diplomat Cho began the discussions, speaking of peace, cooperation, and the benefits of ending border disputes. Commander Drac listened, his reptilian eyes never blinking. When Diplomat Cho finished, he spoke in a dismissive tone. Pretty words. But the Confederation is weak. Your ships flee from battle, like the Dauntless did. Captain Taewon tensed. This was a deliberate insult to his ship and crew. The Dauntless made a tactical retreat after disabling one of your cruisers, he replied carefully, without firing a single weapon. Commander Drac's scales darkened with anger. A trick, no honor in such tactics. He turned to Captain Taewon directly. Your bloodline must be thin to command in such a way. The room fell silent. In Confederation culture, insulting someone's lineage was deeply offensive. Diplomat Cho looked alarmed, clearly trying to think of a way to save the meeting. But before anyone could speak, a strange sound filled the room. It took Captain Taewon a moment to realize what it was. First Officer Ji-ho was laughing. Everyone stared at the human. Commander Drac's hand moved toward his ceremonial weapon. I'm sorry, Ji-ho said, still smiling. But on Earth, we have a custom called roasting where friends insult each other for fun. That comment about Captain Taewon's bloodline was actually pretty good. Commander Drac looked confused. Your species insults for enjoyment? Absolutely, Ji-ho replied. It's a way to show you're comfortable enough with someone to joke with them. The better the insult, the more respect it shows. The Caraxian tilted his head, clearly intrigued. This is a warrior's custom? Often, yes, Jiho said, especially among soldiers who fight together. We call it trash talk. A slow smile spread across Commander Drack's face, showing many sharp teeth. The Caraxian Defense Force has similar customs. We test each other with words before we test with weapons. Captain Tae-wan and Diplomat Cho exchanged shocked glances. The tense moment was passing. Perhaps, Jiho suggested, Commander Drack would share a traditional Caraxian warrior insult? As a cultural exchange? Commander Drack laughed, a rough barking sound. Very well, human. We say, your scales are so dull even a blind cave lizard wouldn't eat you for fear of dying from boredom. The Caraxian delegation chuckled. Jiho grinned. Not bad, he said. On Earth, we might say, your ship maneuvers so poorly it couldn't hit a planet if it was caught in its gravity well. Commander Drack's eyes widened, then he roared with laughter. Good, you understand the form. He turned to his delegation. The human has spirit. As this strange exchange continued, Captain Tae-wan watched in amazement. The entire mood of the meeting had shifted. The Caraxians were relaxing, their aggressive postures softening. Diplomat Cho leaned close to Taiwan. This is remarkable, she whispered. I've never seen Caraxians respond this way to any species. Security Chief Lee was also watching closely. The human is building rapport through shared cultural practices, he observed quietly, even though they've never met before. After several minutes of this unusual diplomatic exchange, Commander Drack raised his hand. Enough. You have skill with words, human. Now, let us discuss real matters. He turned to Diplomat Cho with new respect in his eyes. Your peace proposal. Tell me more about the shared patrol rights. The meeting continued, but with a completely different tone. The Caraxians engaged seriously with the Confederation proposals. By the end, they had agreed to preliminary terms for reducing border tensions. As they left the meeting hall, Diplomat Cho turned to Jiho. First officer, that was extraordinary. You found common ground where none seemed to exist. Jiho shrugged. Humans have dealt with many different cultures on our own world. We learned that sometimes the formal approach isn't the best one. You took a huge risk, Captain Tae-wan said. Laughing at a Caraxian warrior could have ended badly. True, Jiho admitted, but I noticed patterns in their speech and body language that reminded me of certain Earth cultures. I had a feeling it might work. Later, as they prepared to return to the Dauntless, Security Chief Lee approached Jiho in a quiet corridor. First, Officer, I have a request, Lee said, looking slightly uncomfortable. What is it, Chief? I've been studying human combat techniques. They're unusual but effective. Would you be willing to teach me more? Jiho looked surprised. My fighting style might be dangerous for your species. Humans can tolerate more physical stress. That's why I want to learn, Lee replied. Today I saw how understanding human ways helped us. Perhaps it can help in security matters too. Jiho smiled. All right. We'll start with something simple, like basic grappling techniques. As they walked back to the ship, Captain Tae-wan reflected on what he had witnessed. First Officer Park had turned what could have been a diplomatic disaster into a success, using an approach no Confederation diplomat would have considered. Humans were indeed terrifying in many ways. Their physical capabilities, their unconventional thinking, their willingness to take risks. But today had shown Taiwan yet another side of what made humans unique, their ability to find connections with even the most alien of minds. For the first time, Taiwan began to understand why, despite all their frightening qualities, humans might become essential members of every starship crew. The Dauntless returned to Confederation headquarters at the end of their 3-month patrol. Captain Mok Tae-wan sat in his office, staring at the official report form on his computer screen. The cursor blinked next to the section marked Human. Crew Evaluation. In all his years of command, he had never written a report like this. How could he explain what First Officer Park Ji-ho had brought to his ship? How could he make Fleet Command understand? A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. First Officer Ji-ho entered carrying a small bag. His transfer orders had come through that morning. He was being promoted to command his own ship, a Confederation vessel with a mixed alien crew who had specifically requested a human captain. "I wanted to say goodbye, Captain," Ji-ho said, "and to thank you for everything." "You have nothing to thank me for," Tae-won replied. "You saved my ship and crew more than once." Ji-ho smiled. "We saved each other. That's what good crews do." After Ji-ho left, Tae-won turned back to his report. He began to type. Official report, Human Integration Assessment from Captain Mok Tae-won, UCS Dauntless 2, Fleet Admiral Chen Bo-ram, Confederation Command Subject, Performance Evaluation of First Officer Park Ji-ho Human, and Recommendations for Future Human Integration, Admiral Chen. After 3 months serving with a human crew member, I submit this evaluation and strongly recommend that every Confederation vessel be assigned at least one human officer. I understand this recommendation may seem surprising, given common perceptions of human psychology and physiology. Physical capabilities. Humans possess extraordinary physical resilience. First Officer Park survived direct vacuum exposure on multiple occasions with minimal protective equipment. He functioned effectively for 72 hours without sleep. During the Proxima Station rescue, he consumed substances that would be toxic to most Confederation species, coffee, alcohol, spicy foods, and showed no ill effects. Most remarkably, he healed from injuries that would require weeks of medical care for other species. A broken bone, severe radiation burns, and multiple lacerations all healed within days rather than months. Mental adaptability. Human thinking patterns, while often seeming irrational, provide unique problem-solving capabilities. When faced with seemingly impossible situations, First Officer Park consistently found solutions that standard Confederation training would never consider. Examples include using controlled warp core venting to create sensor interference, performing multiple micro-jumps in rapid succession, converting diplomatic tension into cultural exchange through insult humor. Psychological impact on crew. Initially, my crew feared the human officer. His capabilities seemed unnatural and dangerous. However, over time, this fear transformed into respect and admiration. The crew now understands that the same traits that make humans terrifying also make them invaluable in crisis situations. Specific recommendations. All Confederation vessels should have at least one human crew member. Human officers should be given latitude to suggest unconventional solutions. Other crew members should be educated about human customs and capabilities. Medical. Staff should be trained in human physiology. Conclusion. Humans are indeed terrifying. They ignore pain, survive in impossible conditions, and make decisions that seem completely irrational. But in a dangerous galaxy, these very qualities make them the best possible allies. Respectfully submitted, Captain Mok Tae-won. 6 months later, Captain Tae-won sat in the officers' lounge at Confederation headquarters. Around him, other captains shared their experiences with human crew members. The conversation was both fascinating and familiar. "My human engineer drinks a liquid called energy drink that would kill a Zentari," reported Captain Eugene of the Explorer. "But it lets her work for 20 hours straight during emergencies. My human security chief broke his arm during training," added Captain Kim Sang-ho of the Defender. "He asked the doctor to set it quickly so he could return to duty the same day. We had to force him to rest." Captain Park Soon-mi of the Voyager shook her head. "My human navigator fell down a maintenance shaft, 3 decks. When we found her, she was more concerned about the equipment she had damaged than her own injuries. They form emotional attachments to everything," observed Captain Lee Ji-won of the Guardian. "My human communications officer named the ship's computer and talks to it like a friend." But somehow this made our computer systems more efficient. Each story was different, but the theme was always the same. Humans were impossible to understand, but impossible to do without. Captain Nam Hyun Woo of the Endeavour leaned forward. "I heard your new human officer has some unusual hobbies, Taewon." Taewon smiled. Communications specialist Kim Do-yeon had indeed brought some surprises to the Dauntless. He grows plants in his quarters, food plants, and he cooks with them. Cooks? Several captains asked at once. Humans don't just consume prepared nutrients, Taewon explained. They combine raw ingredients using heat and chemicals to create new flavors. Do-yeon invited the crew to something called a dinner party last week. "Did anyone get sick?" Captain Yu asked, concerned. "No, but Dr. Suk had to scan everything 3 times before she would let the crew eat it," Taewon replied. The food was actually quite good. Do-yeon said it was Korean barbecue, a traditional Earth cuisine. Captain Kim Sang-ho laughed. "My human medical officer does something similar. She makes herbal tea from plants, claims it helps with health and relaxation." As the conversation continued, Taewon realized something important. 6 months ago, these captains had been terrified of their human assignments. Now they spoke of their human crew members with affection and pride. "Has anyone here requested to have their human officer transferred?" he asked. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the captains shook their heads. "My human pilot saved my ship twice in the past month," Captain Lee said quietly. "I would never give her up. My human engineer has improved our efficiency by 30%, added Captain Park. "Fleet Command would have to order me to transfer him." The conversation was interrupted by an aide approaching Taewon. "Captain, your transport to the Dauntless is ready. Your new assignment briefing is in your quarters." As Taewon prepared to leave, Captain Yu called out, "What's your next mission?" "Extended deep space exploration," Taewon replied. 6 months, beyond the frontier, just the kind of mission where having a human crew member could make the difference between success and disaster. "Any concerns about Specialist Kim adjusting to such a long mission?" Captain Kim asked. Taewon smiled. Do-yeon has already started planning what he calls a ship garden in the cargo bay. He wants to grow fresh food for the entire crew during the mission. He says humans need variety in their diet or they become sad. "Sad humans are inefficient humans," observed Captain Nam seriously. "You should support this garden project." "I intend to," Taewon replied. "I've learned that keeping humans happy is just as important as understanding their capabilities." As Taewon returned to the Dauntless, he found communications specialist Kim Do-yeon in the cargo bay, examining the space with measuring instruments. "How is the garden planning progressing?" Taewon asked. Do-yeon looked up with the bright expression. Humans wore when discussing something they enjoyed. "Excellent, Captain. I can grow enough vegetables to provide fresh salads for the entire crew twice a week. And I want to try something called kimchi, fermented vegetables that last for months." Fermented vegetables? Taewon was learning to expect unusual things from humans, but this was new. It's a preservation method that also adds beneficial bacteria to the digestive system, Do-yeon explained. "Very healthy. On Earth, we've been eating fermented foods for thousands of years." Taewon nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what beneficial bacteria meant. He had learned to trust human explanations, even when they seemed strange. "Carry on, Specialist Kim," he said. "And remember to coordinate with Dr. Suk about food safety protocols." As he walked to his quarters, Taewon reflected on how much his perspective had changed. A year ago, the idea of eating fermented vegetables made by a human would have horrified him. Now, he was actually curious to try them. Humans were still terrifying. They still did impossible things and survived incredible dangers. But they had also become something else. They had become family. The Dauntless was a better ship with a human crew member. Not just because of their physical capabilities or their unconventional thinking, but because of their humanity itself, their curiosity, their optimism, their strange ability to find joy and connection even in the depths of space. As captain, Taewon prepared for his ship's next mission into the unknown. He had one certainty: whatever dangers they might face, having Kim Do-yeon aboard, meant they would face them together. And in a galaxy full of terrifying unknowns, there was no one he would rather have at his side than a human, even if they were the most terrifying species of all.